All right, I think we can start with a very exciting session. We have the Pharma panel. We're very fortunate to have Clive Cookson from Financial Times who will be running the show here. So, Clive, whenever you're ready, just take it away.
I'm ready now. Thanks. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Clive Cookson, science writer at the Financial Times. This is my first. I've just arrived from London in the middle of Steve's talk. I don't even know if the initiated call it ARDD or ARD. What don't even know. Alex, what's the accepted abbreviation?
ARDD.
ARDD. Okay. Well, it's my first ARDD, and I'm looking forward to meeting a lot of you over the next 2 or 3 days. Anyway, it is my honor now to moderate our panel on the theme, how do we advance longevity in pharma in a credible way? Of course, that's a very broad topic, and it overlaps with many, many other sessions on the excellent ARDD program. We're going to focus on big pharma, on the larger and more established companies, rather than on the hundreds of new longevity startups, which will also have their say. So the issues for discussion are, how can big pharma more effectively identify and tap into the innovative work by all those longevity startups and academia? What pharma companies should be concentrating on in their own R&D centers? And how can companies use their resources to establish biomarkers that might persuade regulators to approve treatments for aging as an indication in its own right? 4 distinguished panelists are going to make brief opening remarks about what they see as the role of big pharma in advancing longevity medicine. Then we'll have a panel discussion between the 5 of us, followed, I hope, by time for questions from you in the audience. So, Berthil Clasen, Associate Vice President for Corporate Business Development at Eli Lilly, where he looks particularly for new business developments. He's going to kick us off. And Alex at the end said Lilly is Mr. Longevity. So, Mr. Longevity, up to you.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you for having me here today. What a splendid conference. Congratulations. So, really good questions. How can pharma effectively help push the boundaries of longevity science? And I think there's a lot of facets to how you can attack that question. So I'm going to comment from a couple of angles, but putting on my business development hat, the way we engage with the ecosystem, the way we try to work with biotech, the way we try to work with academia, in collaborating, in taking over assets, taking over companies. So with that framework in mind, I'm going to be hitting on 3 things. First, as a company, Eli Lilly, how do we find the opportunity? How do we engage with the ecosystem? What do we look for? Number 2, how do we then go about negotiating those, what that looks like, and getting the opportunity inside the Lilly walls? And number 3, after we've done a partnership or collaboration with academia or with biotech, how do we now realize the value, the scientific promise of this collaboration? So finding the opportunity. There's a couple of ways. We have traditional search and evaluate. Top-level scientists keeping their ear to the ground. What is happening out there? What is moving and shaking? Where do we see a convergence around unmet medical need and emerging science that enables the drugging of targets that otherwise would be intractable? We also engage with biotech and academia in other ways. We invest in small biotech companies, we have innovation labs, we have collaborative R&D efforts, so on and so forth. But I think importantly, when we think about longevity, what is really important is really the same as any other therapeutic area or disease state. We need to have ongoing, robust conversations going both ways. As a company, we need to understand what is happening out there. Who's innovating? How are they innovating? How can we use one innovation from over here together with an innovation over here, bring it together, and now progress science? That is important in any therapeutic area. I think even more so in what I would call a nascent gero-therapeutic area like longevity. We've made a lot of progress. There's still ways to go before we get to the point where we can consistently and robustly extend both health span and lifespan. Getting the opportunity, well, again, good engagement between academia and biotech enables good conversations, leads to good results in terms of negotiations. And then in terms of realizing the scientific potential and value of an opportunity, we've talked a lot about we've heard a lot about biomarkers today, extremely important as we think about how to engage with regulators and actually getting medicines on the market. We can tap into that a little bit later. I think there's another important facet to consider here, environmental shaping. You go out and you talk to a lot of regulators, you talk to a lot of physicians right now, and you say longevity, is that a disease? Or lack of longevity, lack of health span, is that a disease? And you may not get a yes. 15 years ago, if you went out and asked the same question for obesity, people would say, nope, it's not a disease. Look at where we are with obesity now. I think we need to get to a similar point with health span and lifespan, and the way to do that is to really engage in what we call environmental shaping. So I think that really hits on sort of the umbrella of business development, engagement with the ecosystem. We can circle back to internal R&D efforts a little bit later, but I do want to pass it on.
Well, thank you for starting us off so well. So Priya Singhal, did I pronounce that right?
Perfect.
Priya Singhal is Executive VP and Head of Development at Biogen. She's accountable there for the company's whole clinical and marketed portfolio. Priya, please.
Thank you, Clive, and wonderful to be here with this distinguished panel. And thank you, Alex, for organizing. I think this is a critical topic. And before I delve into how we are thinking about longevity, aging, and all of that, I just wanted to kind of throw out some of the statistics that I think are staggering, and probably other speakers have alluded to them. But we expect that by 2050, the population over the age of 65 is going to go from 761 million in the world to 1.6 billion. And the population over 80 is going to triple. And 80% of the aging population will be living in the low and middle income countries. And so I think what drug development has been able to do for the world, and I know we all represent it in different ways because no one constituent can bring drug development to the forefront. It is an ecosystem and it has to work beautifully together, is that we've been able to change and enhance human survival. And that's important, and that's lifespan for sure. But the health span question still remains. And I think that, I was so impressed because when I was reading more about the field, I figured that WHO has named 2021 to 2030 the decade of healthy aging. And this is a very laudable initiative, but it's focused on access, it's focused on equity. All of these aspects are really critical. The question is, who is focusing on ensuring that there are therapeutics, gerotherapeutics or geroscience or the geriatric syndromes? Who's going to be tackling them? And I think there's several aspects to it, and I want to call out three. Number one and foremost, I think, is identification of it as a focus. Today, we are all focused on therapeutic areas. We're all looking at disease. We're not looking necessarily to have therapeutics that will prevent disease. We're still in the age of where we're looking at, some of these are cures, but there's far and few between. Most of them are trying really very laudably to look for secondary prevention. We're not at the stage of primary prevention yet. We're at the stage of secondary prevention, if that. So first is identification. Second is we function in an ecosystem. I think that was mentioned by you too, Berthil. And I think the question here is, today, there is no regulatory framework for developing therapeutics for aging. FDA, European Medicines Agency, and several other agencies around the world, I think all of them really essentially do not recognize aging. So getting aging as an indication for a product hasn't yet happened. So we're still trying to address that. So identification, creating a framework is very important. I see us at Biogen as large biotech, and that's a huge responsibility. Because I think, as was mentioned, we have to tackle it from a regulatory perspective, we have to tackle it from a policy perspective, but we cannot afford to stop our innovation efforts in terms of developing therapeutics for diseases that are really higher prevalence in the aging population. And so I'll talk about a little more maybe downstream about what are our focus areas. But the first is identification. The second, I think, is really the biomarker development. But biomarkers, and you heard about all of these are about age prediction and aging and all of that. But we are doubling and tripling down on how do you figure out what the biomarkers are to be able to de-risk biology for the diseases that are the highest prevalence in the aging population. And I'll talk more about that. The third and final thing, I think, is that how do we make sure that we de-risk these strategies early? So let's say we do have a target of interest. How do we de-risk it quickly? Because today, this industry, the biotech industry, is under a lot of pressure. And so we have to do everything faster and smarter and less expensive. And we have to fail early. Well, how can you fail early if you don't have the right tools? So we're coming at it from all those perspectives, and it's a very large ask. But I think this is really the way to kind of think about it in a very systematic way. And innovation, we believe, happens everywhere. So business development, keeping our ears close to the ground, making sure we have an approach to partnership is first and foremost, always. So we kind of are agnostic to whether we are developing these innovations internally or externally. The question is, can we get at the right innovations at the right time and accelerate to outcome?
Thank you very much, Priya. I liked your 3 points, and also I like the distinction between you made between big biotech and big pharma. So I don't know whether our next speaker, Xing Wang, who is executive president of Fosun Pharma, and among other things, as the boss, he's responsible for the company's global R&D. Xing, are you big pharma, big biotech, or both?
I think we are a mixture of both.
Anyway, please.
Sure. First of all, thank Alex for putting me on the stage like this. I did not expect to talk on this point, but about almost 3 years ago, when I was recruited to Fosun Pharma, I was told one of our objectives is 121. Initially, I did not know what that means. Then I was told our aim is to live up to 121 years old. I thought that was a joke, but was put on everywhere in Fosun Pharma. The reason to put on 121 is because by whatever people believing is 120 years old. So with our effort, we would like to be 121. So since then, my mission is to look for the drugs, whatever therapeutic possibilities to extend life. And as you can imagine, it's been frustrating to think about conduct any drug development for longevity because first of all, there's no end point. As we all been doing drug development for years, I used to work in Novartis Global. We need to know what the end point is accepted. I don't think FDA or EMA, whoever was accepting age for longevity as an endpoint at this stage. And so we start thinking, and also we won't be able to conduct any trial that long. In particular, if your drug is to prolong life. So we're thinking back, if we're thinking reverse, What happens if we all born with a fixed age, for example, 120 years, and then whatever we do since we're born, since our early life programming, what we are doing is reducing our lifespan. And everything good or bad, or mostly bad, are reducing how long we can live. If you think about those who lived beyond age 100, most of them were living in quiet life, less disturbed, more balanced, rather than those who are very excited, energetic, and as those professional athletes, I don't think many of them or few of them would live beyond 100. So with me as being trained as a cardiologist, I was thinking about, instead of looking into what will prolong life, I was looking into specific disease, which will stop one from living longer. And that's why from almost like 2 years ago, we start, first one we're looking into is the Alzheimer's disease, and we're looking for the early causal factors and early markers, and lately we start licensing in a product which is at late stage of phase 3, and we also started our own the early investigations, and particularly lately we've been talking with in silico on the neural inflammation side, how we can really targeting at the Alzheimer's as one of the factors will kill us early. So our goal, perhaps, maybe most of you don't like, I've been hearing last 2 days is all about longevity, living longer, but I'm talking about how we can stop us from dying early, so in that way we'll live longer in reverse. So that's what I would be sharing.
Thank you very much, Xing Li. I like the 121. Is that still
our mission?
Still your mission, great. Okay, well, our final panelist really needs no introduction here, because Alex is one of the most energetic and imaginative people in the whole of bioscience. Of course, founder and CEO of In Silico Medicine, and founder and co-chair of this very event. So, Alex, please.
Thank you, Clive. Huge fan of your work, by the way. For those of you who don't know Clive, he is a historian of science, and I love your articles. So deeply honored for you to see you here. He can move markets too. So I wish we had you first. Then we would have even more pharma at the conference. But I've been in aging and longevity for 20 years now. I have had rosy glasses before, thinking that if I found a company that would focus on novel targets that would be targeting aging directly and also setting that as a company mission, the big pharmaceutical companies would flock and pay us some money and invest. So that was the premise in 2013. Turns out, no. One thing that I learned very early in 2015 is that there is no money in novel targets for startups. So if you're starting a company around novel targets, well, see you at phase 2. Or you might get some small sponsorship from Pharma, and unless they kind of stick to the plan that they set for themselves for a long time, they will actually deprioritize. Very, very often happens. And one of the reasons why we have this pharma panel, and we have one more, and you must invite your friends. I know that Steve just gave a talk and some people went to follow the future Nobel laureate, hopefully. We need one on aging. But bring them here back, because I think for anybody in aging research, in small biotechs, in academia, it's extremely important to understand how pharma works. Big pharma, big biotech, actually very little difference nowadays. They all move at rapid speeds, they innovate, they take risks, but at the same time they have to work within the framework that the regulators put in place. And as we've already heard, unless the regulatory landscape dramatically changes, they will not be able to make dramatic bets in aging research. And some of the companies recently demonstrated that obesity, for example, a biological process that was not considered to be a dramatic disease, could be a source of income, and at the same time the pathway to the reduction of many diseases at the same time. But if you don't know the story of the most famous drug in the world that was profiled in South Park, GLP-1s, that is a 43, 45-year-old target. And originally it was actually approved for and developed for diabetes, which is a clear disease. So that's why if you want to work with pharma, you need to think about the clear regulatory approval, have very clear direction that pharma wants within the therapeutic areas that are focused on. So that's why we've heard the therapeutic areas that Eli Lilly and Biogen are focused on. If you're outside, most likely you will not be super welcome. I mean, they will talk to you, but you're going to waste your time and theirs. So you need to understand the big pharma strategy extremely well. Also, even if aging was a disease, the pathway from target discovery to phase 3 to approval is going to be 12 years. Maybe we can cut it down to 8 with AI and automation, but it's still very long. Very often it's actually longer than the career path within one company of a pharmaceutical executive. And many of them jump from place to place, unfortunately. Actually, one of the reasons why Lilly and Novo managed to get the GLP-1s on the market for obesity is because people stuck with the companies for 20 years for some of them. So it's extremely important to retain the veterans. It costs billions of dollars to get to phase 3 approval. Very rare. Currently 50 drugs are being approved every year. The target novelty is very, very moderately novel. So either old drugs new drugs for old targets, or sometimes very, very rarely you've got new therapeutic modalities for old targets. But they are dancing within a target space of 150 targets for maybe all diseases. So it's very extremely important to understand what pharma wants and to provide them with what they need. And they need biomarkers to be able to expand indications of their currently approved drugs or drugs that are being approved. So for example, for Eli Lilly, they have anti-amyloid antibody that I would take myself right now if it were available, because side effects are, if you look at the clinical trials, it's basically like Pascal's wager. If you believe in amyloid hypothesis, well, you're going to benefit if it works. If it doesn't, well, you don't really lose anything because side effects are so small. But if you provide a beautiful biomarker for early stage Alzheimer's detection and put people on this drug, we will know whether the amyloid hypothesis works or not. And they have also anti-tau and other beautiful drugs. Now we can do indication expansion using biomarkers for GLP-1s, hopefully. And also, Eli Lilly is one of the companies that I aspire to and promote always, because they openly announce that longevity is part of the corporate strategy. Actually, so that Fosun Pharma, one-to-one is a big thing. And by the way, since the origin of this company is in China, one-to-one means, it's kind of like you march. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. So it will go way beyond 121, hopefully, with China innovative spirit. It's extremely important to understand what these companies want and need. So biomarkers to augment their current drug discovery and development pipeline, and B, innovative therapeutics that target disease and aging at the same time, because the original pathway would need to be a disease. Otherwise, you cannot get a drug approved. And then probably you would be able to expand beyond into biological processes. So that's my experience last 20 years. Our business model is that we kind of bake the cookies and then sell the cookies to the cookie makers. So we develop drugs and then sell them to pharma, usually at the preclinical stage or early clinical stage. And we really try to target aging and disease within the pipeline, even if you have to put it on cancer first. If you know the target hypothesis also may work in aging, beautiful, because later we'll be able to expand indications. And at this conference, I highly recommend engaging as much as possible with pharma, because you can get a Nobel Prize, it's great, for some great science, but having a drug approved will impact people's health for real at scale. Currently, last, let's say, 10 years Nobel Prizes, most of them have never touched a patient to provide significant patient benefit. So you need to interact with pharma as much as possible. That's where I would end. Sorry for this long monologue, and leave it to the pharma professionals to continue.
Well, thank you for those 4 excellent introductions. Before we have a general conversation, I can't resist asking Berthil a more Lilly-specific question, particularly since I saw that the orforgliptron, the new oral obesity treatment, got good results today. So the question is, how is Lilly melding, if it is, the work on GLP-1s and obesity and with your work on longevity?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it ties into comments made by all 3, in particular some of the points you touched on, Alex. The way we think about the pathway towards an approved drug that can actually benefit patients is the strategy of developing a drug for a disease that we believe might also have positive benefits on longevity. You get the drug approved, but in the course of running your clinical studies, you build in prospective exploratory analyses where you look at, number 1, the effects of the drugs on potential biomarkers. And maybe you also try to do segmentation of patients across intervention to see if you can begin understanding underlying causes with or without intervention that could detract from 121. If we as a society, if we as a scientific group across pharma, biotech, and academia begin building this body of evidence, my hope is we can get to a point where we have not just biomarkers, but a composite score that can predict the effect of an intervention on the outcome vis-a-vis longevity, so we can de-risk, we can place those bets, and we can get drugs approved. So I think near term, yes, we need drugs against the disease with line extension opportunities to expand in longevity. A little bit further into the future, there might be a world, there might be a reality where we can begin actually developing drugs against lifespan or health span, or for lifespan or health span in the first instance. Coming at your question, and so that's some of the thinking we're having around a drug like orforgliptron. I think there's another dimension in terms of how to break down what might happen in the near term and what might happen a little bit further into the future. Again, building on your 121, I see that framework as really tapping into what I would call halting aging, halting disease, which is likely where we need to begin. The moonshot, or what we might want to aim for a little bit further into the future, is preventative aging. Not preventative, but regenerative. Can we actually identify some of the aging processes and begin reversing those? And especially in the context of segmenting people, understanding who have different genetic makeups, epigenetic profiles, and now target those very specifically and precisely, could lead to a reality where we can now actually reverse aging.
Priya, would you like to pick that up, and particularly that Berthil's point about building up the body of evidence? To what extent is that, could that be a more collaborative endeavor by the pharma and biotech industries than is normal? How do you think it should be built up? And you talked about that as one of your 3 points.
Yeah, exactly. I'll just maybe start before I kind of come to that point to say that, I think the way I think about the 121 is that it would be a wonderful outcome if those 121 years we could have good quality of life.
Yeah.
And that is why at Biogen, we are focusing on two of the key diseases that are clearly related or much higher incidence in the aging population. For example, Parkinson's, the incidence of Parkinson's increases tenfold between the ages of 50 to 80 than prior. It's clearly related to aging. And that is because of, the cellular and molecular waste that cannot be released. It's mitochondrial dysfunction, lysosomal dysfunction, and so many other processes. So the way we're tackling that is with a partnership, Clive, to the question that you're asking. So we have actually been investing in the field of Parkinson's disease for more than a decade. And we have failed in Parkinson's disease with certain modalities. And this is a very new strategy that we've taken on. And that is because we've seen the innovation and the body of evidence, as was kind of referenced to, where we know that patients or people with LRRK2 mutations actually have lysosomal dysfunction. And if you can inhibit that LRRK2 enzyme, which is responsible for this buildup, potentially you can rid them of PD, early Parkinson's disease. So what we've done is we've said, okay, that LRRK2 mutation, to find those patients, it's a very, very small number of patients in the world. But what if, and there's quite a building body of evidence, that it's not just patients with LRRK2 mutations who develop Parkinson's disease. It's also patients who we think are idiopathic or no known etiology for Parkinson's disease, who may be having different levels of LRRK2, increased activity. So what if we gave all idiopathic patients, all comers, a LRRK2 inhibitor? And that's a study that's called the LUMA study. It's a collaboration, again, it's a partnership with Denali Therapeutics. An exceptional partnership, I would say. It's been really a wonderful to partner with them. We operationalized that study, we completed enrollment of that study, and we'll get a readout next year. And this is a phase 2 study. If it is positive, then we would launch a phase 3 program. But I think where this comes in is it's a risk share in the ecosystem. It's an innovation that Denali came up with. We have the expertise of how to find the patients, run a global study in record time, and get to a readout. And we have a lot of history on engaging with regulators on Parkinson's disease endpoints. Because you may be surprised to learn that actually there isn't a consensus. And so we've had to work really hard on a public-private consortia. Same and similar example with Alzheimer's disease. We had the first ever disease-modified treatment that was approved, and then the second ever disease-modified treatment that was approved, which is currently on the market and today approved now in 48 countries around the world. This is Leqembi, which is an anti-amyloid. And I think what's really interesting here is before Biogen had that first product, there was no imaging biomarker for Alzheimer's disease. We were able to establish a surrogate biomarker for amyloid clearance, as amyloid clearance for Alzheimer's disease. But what I'm really excited about is two things in Alzheimer's disease. Again, a disease that is a higher prevalence with age. Now, unlike Parkinson's disease, Alzheimer's is not just related to age. It's genetic, it's lifestyle, it's age, and probably a lot of other things that we don't even know yet. But we know there's certain hallmarks. So we focused on the amyloid. We're now focusing on tau, and we will get a readout on our antisense oligonucleotide, which is in phase 2, with 3 doses and 2 frequencies of regimens next year as well. So, we'll have some real important data. Whether it succeeds or not is less important than what will we learn from this kind of landmark trial. So that's exciting. And with the anti-amyloid, I want to just address one last point that I think what's really important is, okay, with early and mild Alzheimer's disease, you can clear amyloid, which has been growing in the brain and adding in the brain for 2 decades before you manifest. What if we could remove the amyloid from the brain and prevent further accumulation of amyloid and or prevent cognitive decline in patients who have a catastrophic level of amyloid? And that's another study that we're running, 2 studies actually. It's called the AHEAD 345, and this is again in partnership. So, you know, we have, I think, a highly partnered pipeline, and that will read out in 2028. So very exciting sort of inflection points coming up in the next 18 months to 3 years.
That is exciting. I particularly like this, the LUMA study, and dying to see the phase 2 results of that. You say 2026?
Yes.
That'll be great.
26.
Yeah. So, Xing Li, given that there are many hundreds of longevity startups and probably very, very many in China, as well as the ones we know about in Europe and the US, how do you choose which ones to collaborate with? Because the winnowing process must be quite difficult.
It's a tough one. Yeah, we collaborate with in silico. No, I mean, that's really tough to look for. Most of the longevity companies, I mean, last year I was also in this meeting. This year I'm here again looking for potential collaborative opportunities. But so far, most are either on biomarkers or on the descriptive studies. As pharmaceutical companies, you're looking for some target you can intervention on, you can intervene on. You're more looking at causal relationship rather than the collateral. So that's why at this stage, our focus is more on the degenerative disease, chronic disease, which kill people early. So in that way, at least we can slow down that process. I mean, one of my research topic many years ago when I was in academics was talking about early life programming. I don't know whether anybody here familiar with that. It's started from Southampton with David Barker, started the whole the story, and we carried on, which really have something to do with epigenetics and also the longevity study. And that's talking about the cardiovascular outcome for those mothers was born in 1920s, are starved due to that that era, and most of those born became adult and died early of cardiovascular chronic diseases. So in that way, when we're looking for before we see anything like astronomically important and a breakthrough on prolonged life as on longevity, our goal is still looking for chronic disease, which will slow down the aging process. As I mentioned at the beginning, if we believe our gene determines how long we live to a certain percentile, whatever the chronic disease or adverse lifestyle we expose our risk to, if we can find anything to modify those, these will be also the ones we are looking for too. So we are widely open for collaboration. That's also why we just licensed in, as I mentioned, a phase 3 product on the Alzheimer's disease. At this stage, we are facing the shortage as the both ESI and Biogene's antibody has been facing a little bit of challenge, I would say, because of the areas of that adverse events, and we're looking forward to hear more of the tau, which gives more promising outcome.
Yes. Just how active is, because I don't really know the answer to this, the longevity R&D scene in China in smaller companies and universities? Is it comparable to what we're seeing here in Europe and the States?
Very much so. It's particularly, there's, I would say, the new rich in China. And the number one concern, they also always ask you, how can we live longer? So they start looking into some type of therapies like stem cell injection and whatever is not proved therapeutics. So whenever they have money, they're always investing on the longevity related. So in that way, Alex should know more. And if you target a tangible target, there will be investment. But obviously, if you're looking for, I would say, non-mainstream therapies, which some of them go after as a formal pharmaceutical company, we will not pursue without any evidence.
Yes, that's very interesting. And Alex, I want to sort of go back to ask you who you think should be marshalling all the evidence for the regulators to actually see longevity or aging as an indication worth considering in the licensing procedure, because it's been raised, but who's going to do it?
So sure, there are many lobbying efforts around the world trying to educate the regulators on how to develop anti-aging therapeutics and how to position aging as a disease process or as a process that we need to target with interventions. I published extensively on that, multiple papers on how to include aging into ICD and other codes better in order to provide a pathway for reimbursement. But at the end of the day, most of the regulators, they actually they really have the will to go after aging, and many of them really want to go after aging, but they want to see some evidence. And currently, first of all, there is no drug approved for a disease that we can tangibly say is working in aging. So nothing works, in my opinion. So yeah, we know diet, you can argue with me, many of you would argue that, diet, exercise, sleep, etc., or what I like to call DYMT, do what your mother told you, is likely to work. Some of the drugs, like GLP-1s, are definitely going to work on the population level, but if you are an already healthy adult, with good body composition, you might not benefit as much, even though you may, but you may benefit even more from Cialis, actually, male or female. But we don't know. So through population statistics, we do see some early signs, but there is no tangible biomarker where you can say that, yes, I am actually addressing aging. That is why, of course, we are engaging with regulators, we talk to them. Actually, recently, the US got a gift from God, in my opinion. Jim O'Neill became the Deputy Director of Health and Human Services under FK Jr. And if you know Jim O'Neill, he is actually very active in longevity. He was the CEO of the SENS Foundation, if Aubrey is here. So going to, extreme conviction that human life needs to be extended and the productive life of this entire life needs to be extended. So I hope that he might actually contribute to the US policy in aging. We'll see if he is true to his beliefs within the new administration. But in general, we need to demonstrate that the currently approved therapeutics, and there are very few good drugs out there, can work in aging. That is why, so again, to resonate with Lilly, Biogen, and Fosun, we really need to demonstrate that within the currently, that basically the last mile when you are trying to get a therapeutic approved, you should be doing a lot of aging biomarker work to demonstrate that you are reversing some of the clocks, that you are improving people's lives, that you are really making a tangible impact on aging. And that's where the connection with top academics in the world would play a huge role because academics are the ones to publish big papers, make a lot of noise, and actually they have higher degree of credibility in the public eye than some of the pharmaceutical companies, even though pharmaceutical companies do most of the work on the development. So we need to approve therapeutics for a disease, preferably for an age-related disease. We just published a couple papers showing that some of the age-related diseases provide optimal pathways. They become test beds for anti-aging interventions. Like, for example, we chose IPF. That's a novel target. And by the way, probably #1 person in fibrosis, Chris Cooper, just presented on cardiofibrosis and also showed that TNIC may be implicated. We found this target using aging research and also using aging clocks. Now we completed phase 2A trial and also did proteomic biomarkers, so showing that we have some age reversal. Cannot talk about that too much because I have a paper being submitted to a journal. But come to my lecture on Friday and you'll see some preview of that, and also read our latest Nature Medicine paper on the phase 2A results. That's the target that we've discovered, our own chemistry, our own biology, all the way to phase 2A. So there we're trying to demonstrate how to do it end-to-end, but there is no shortage of great targets that might be implicated in aging. One of the targets that I deeply love, that's another example, is called NLRP3. It's inflammasome. It's basically targeting inflammaging. BioAge prioritized it as their phase 1 lead asset now. We also love this target. I developed the brain penetrant, very safe to my knowledge. Probably we think that it's vastly best in class with very few competitors in the market, and we IND enabled it. So that target is very well known in the aging community. So I would say probably 20–30% of all papers on NLRP3, they mention aging. So you don't need to go and search for new biomarkers. It's very well established. It's like GLP-1. So people know it since 2000. And we wanted to develop a molecule that is ultra brain penetrant, so may work in the brain, and safer than anything else. Because if you are developing a molecule for chronic disease, safety is your ultimate priority. We've seen Pfizer's recent failure with danuglipron, GLP-1 drug, also a small molecule. So Eli Lilly succeeded massively, and Pfizer failed in phase 3, just with one patient with liver enzyme elevation out of the 1,400. So that's the margin of safety that you need to achieve. It has to be absolutely safe. So we are developing one, so we just IND-enabled our drug. Now we're in a partnering mode with pharma companies, so whoever shows that they want to develop it for a neurodegenerative disease, but also for aging, we would welcome those companies with open arms. We are in the BD process. And of course, 60% of my targets on the in silico list have dual purpose, aging and disease. And again, at the later stage trials in phase 2, you can start doing aging clocks. Sometimes it's extremely difficult because your clinical team would say, oh, why are you doing this? It's not necessary. And by the way, you can get into trouble sometimes if you do that because you might see something that you don't want. That's why it's extremely important to establish the peer review process in the company and publish as much as possible. We publish one paper every 7 days. I think that this is the path to take. You demonstrate to the regulators that you can get a drug approved within the current regulatory framework, show that it works in aging, show that there is a pathway with biomarkers, and then do it again and again and again and again for every disease. And then you can develop drugs for aging. That's my opinion.
We've got 10 more minutes. So who would like to ask our panel anything from the floor? Yes, sir, at the back. Have we got a mic or do you want to shout?
We have a mic. We've got a team of volunteers, so let's actually put a mic in the back and maybe one mic over there.
Thank you for the great discussion, and I'm not sure to whom I want to address my question, but It's on repurposing of existing drugs. So following your tackle, Alex, that there always needs to be an indication. There is already a few thousand compounds that have proven and gone through clinical trials. And what kind of role does it play in your companies to use one of those compounds and applying it to longevity or obesity?
I'm going to put that to Berthil because his company has probably got more existing companies than the others put together.
Yeah, it's a good question. So, as a big pharma company or a big biotech company, there's some rather strict rules we have to play by. So if we conduct a study, we collect samples, the extent to which we can analyze those samples or analyze the data is really restricted by what we sort of stipulated from the get-go. And if we are to go back and do something with the samples or the data that we did not stipulate originally, now we need to seek consent from all of the patients. So we are at an interesting inflection point right now because of what I would call the convergence of, or an appreciation of an unmet medical need and maturation of data. Companies like Lilly is becoming very interested. And you're right, we do have therapeutic area expertise that is adjacent to some of the most, I would argue, most important disease states to aging. We've talked extensively about neuroscience, Alzheimer's. We've talked about the GLP-1 class. You touched a little bit on inflammation. So what we think needs to happen now is when we begin developing some of these drugs where we think there's a biological or scientific rationale, build in these exploratory secondary endpoints or analyses to begin teasing out the potential for these disease-oriented drugs to also have impact on health span or lifespan. That's how we see the path forward.
Does anyone else want to answer that? Otherwise, we'll probably take another question. Yes, lady down.
Can I just
add
Alex,
yes.
one small point to that? So one thing on repurposing, everybody wants to do repurposing. There, one key element is patent life. For example, rapamycin is off patent. It's one of the best TOR inhibitors out there. We know it extends life in every organism. Right now, to do a clinical trial for rapamycin using aging clocks, nobody will pay for that because a phase 3 study will cost you $150 million at least. So you won't be able to do that. That's why Nir Barzilai, the wonderful scientist out of Albert Einstein, is trying to repurpose metformin for longevity. By the way, should work in theory. But nobody wants to pay for it. So that's why it's extremely important to make sure that pharma, when they are doing the phase 3 trial, they do the aging clocks. While they're still on patent, they can try to do indication expansion. And after that, there are different waves. So first, they're going with biologics. Then they can actually repurpose with this, they can do a small molecule. Small molecule is always better than biologics, many reasons for that. And there, while they're still on patent, they can go after longevity. I hope, inshallah, as we say in the Middle East, Eli Lilly is going to do that with orforglipron. Because even though the market has overreacted to the recent data, I think that they just didn't do maybe good PR on that. But the results are phenomenal for a small molecule. And you can basically, with a small molecule, it's so cheap to manufacture, so easy to put on the market, so easy to give it to the unprivileged countries. You don't need to have refrigeration infrastructure. And they have a long patent life. So I hope that this will be the first longevity therapeutic at scale. So yes, please do that.
We got two questions in the middle here. You first, and then the lady in front.
Thank you for this very insightful discussion. And I have a question for Alex. As you stated that there is no drug for everyone for aging, which I totally agree. But how do you think about precision medicine? Would it be possible to have a, let's say, an algorithm that is good enough for everyone to recommend the proper intervention for aging?
Well, here we have human longevity on site with Dr. Wei-Wu He, who is one of the thought leaders on that. And I think that you should talk to him. They've managed to achieve very, very, very high profile data set and also the cohort of patients that they are trying to ensure that they don't die of something stupid early enough. and that's one of the best protocols there is, to my knowledge. I use them too. There are many other competitors, but there is only so much you can squeeze out of prevention and do what your mother told you. Then you have to actually have therapeutics. And without that, it's impossible to do anything. Even prescribing some of the therapeutics in the Lilly portfolio that I like so much, like Cialis 5 milligrams, SGLT2Is, Jardins, and also hopefully the orforglipron once it reaches the market. It's not easy to do that for longevity. You actually need to have longevity doctors working with you. So in addition to diagnostics, you also need to have some therapeutic intervention. And I think that for all of you, just come to Human Longevity here and talk to them. They're very academically active, and they can share their ideas.
Yes, the lady there.
Yeah, thank you. This is more of a comment rather than a question. Having been sat on the other side of the table for most of my career, the difference between getting medicines approved, getting partnerships, is biomarkers. Okay, I spent 40 years of my life trying to get biomarkers. I've largely failed. So one of the things I think we have to do as a community here is really coalesce about things that are important, probably pleiotropic for a number of diseases, but have an impact on aging. I've just listened to Steve's great talk on aging clocks, but there's about 40 different aging clocks. So actually, until we coalesce on something, really get the data behind it, and then work with big companies. The FDA want you to validate biomarkers. That is no mean feat. It probably means running it in a phase 3 study, okay? That's a lot of money. So the plea really, I think, is around us as a community coalescing on biomarkers, working with the guys with money. None of us have got any money in biotech at the moment. So working with those big partners on important mechanisms, important endpoints, and validating them.
Thank you. Was there a last question at the back? Yes.
So just a comment. So on that, there is an Aging Biomarker Consortium here at the conference. Talk to Steve Horvath and Vadim Gladyshev. So they are doing exactly that.
Well, thank you. That was a very good point, and I agree. Yes, you got the last question word.
I was thinking about the repurposing of drugs. Is not one way forward to combine drugs?
And get new patent protection, you mean? Yes. Priya, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I was actually going to comment on that question because I think repurposing drugs, metformin, rapamycin, you brought up all the examples. I think there has to be a framework to incentivize investment to explore these combinations or the drugs one at a time, and currently that does not exist in any payer system in the world. So this is the stumbling block. I think it's intellectual property and it's reimbursement. Because I think that what you're asking for is an investment without any return on the investment. And that is the stumbling block for companies or for people or even governments to invest. And I think that without that framework, it will be hard to incentivize or explore. I also think that it's another amazing sort of gap we have where AI can play a really important role. I saw a lot of the posters out there on digital twins and that, and I think that that's the way that we can potentially explore it at a fraction of the cost. So I guess my question is that first, of course, we need to establish the biomarkers, as you rightly said, the endpoints, because we don't have a consensus on that. And if you can get there, then we can explore all of these in simulations. We don't always have to go to patients, because it's very hard to find patients. And we want to be fair and ethical. So, but I think AI, with the advent of AI, this opens a huge field. And we should be exploring all of those.
I'm amazed that it's taken until now for anyone explicitly to mention AI, but so thank you, Priya. Yes, this is going to be the real last question.
Yes, okay. Yeah, first of all, thank you because it's super interesting and little sponsor moment. We need money at the Biomarker Review Consortium to speed up the development. So if you companies want to invest on us, we are happy to take any contribute. And my question was more about your comment about repurposing of drug. No? So maybe it's a naive question, and you said that there is not enough interest from like companies. But wouldn't like a company that rated a patent on a molecule make billions of dollars if the same molecule, instead of target a small population, is actually targeting the aging community, which is billions of people? So how this would not incentivize, I mean, a company to invest money to test if the drug they already have patented can actually be applied for different purposes?
I'm not a patent lawyer. Let me just say that, but I can tell you that that is not the case. That is not the case. And in fact, small molecules are under a lot of pressure in the United States with the Inflation Reduction Act. So there's lots of policies closing in on modalities. And of course, we're doing everything we can to fight that, but these are very big issues. And that's why I think you will find less interest. I also wanted to make another comment. I don't think it came out adequately in our discussion that getting a drug approved is only the first step. It has to be reimbursed. And we have many drugs that get approved but fail reimbursement, or there's a huge gap. And that causes companies to take stock, to be risk averse. And we want to actually not have that. That's not ideal for innovation. So unfortunately, that's not the case for IP.
And the payers will expect small molecules that you can just pop as a pill or a capsule to be much cheaper, of course.
Yes, exactly. And they'll always compare it to generics.
Yes.
For example, you know, if you have a major skin condition or dermatology condition, you have to prove that it's going to be better than a steroid application. But steroids were never really tested in that same way. So now you have to use them as background therapy. So, you know, there's a lot of things that we have to conform to, and it's not an equal table. Regulators and payers may have the final decision. You can make the case, but you may not win.
Of course, sorry. In an ideal world, some of these very expensive trials for looking for biomarkers and would be undertaken by the public sector bodies like the NIH, the Medical Research Council in the UK, philanthropies, but they don't
Totally agree. And actually there's a National Institute of Aging.
Yes.
I'm sure everybody's familiar. It's an agency, one of the 27 agencies in the National Institutes of Health, the NIH. They have been in existence since 1974. And they talk a lot about everything that they're doing, but I think the big thing is, what is the true advancement in kind of getting us to a place where we have endpoints, biomarkers, and strategies. I do think, having been part of a lot of first-in-class products that I've had the privilege and the honor to contribute and lead in many situations, there's a path forward, but it is long and arduous.
Thank you. I'm afraid that is going to be the final word. Thank you all very much.